Think about this. The left complains about hate crimes against minorities, while the right complains that the left is dangerous. It seems that everyone has become wildly intolerant of all viewpoints but their own. Let's see if the data illustrates if intolerance is getting worse, what intolerance is, and finally, some reasons for it. If you like these conversations, hit those like and subscribe buttons. My name is Chris, and this is the Think Report. Let's start out by determining if intolerance is getting worse. The best research I could find was a Pew Research study about religious intolerance from 2014. This is far from perfect research on this particular topic, but I think that there are some useful insights. If we use religion as a proxy for any major ideology, I think we can draw some conclusions. Pew Research has been tracking two metrics since 2017. The first is social hostilities, which measures acts of hostility by private individuals or organizations. The second is government restrictions, which measures government laws, policies, and actions that restrict religious beliefs and practices. The Government Restrictions Index comprises 20 measures of restrictions, including efforts by governments to ban particular faiths, prohibit conversions, limit preaching, or give preferential treatment to one or more religious groups. When you look at these figures combined together, you can see a growing amount of countries where levels of government restrictions are high or very high. In this second graph, we can also see the percent of global population living where these restrictions is growing. If we separate out these two metrics and graph them on a scatter plot, you can see there's a clear pattern where the dots move from the bottom left of the graph, where there's low government restrictions and low social hostilities, to the top right, where there's high government restrictions and high social hostilities. Isn't that crazy how obvious the pattern is? Like I mentioned earlier, this isn't perfect data because A, it's 9-year-old data, and B, it measures religious intolerance instead of a more broad ideological intolerance, which would include religion, but also political affiliations and social movements. But I do think that religion is a fair proxy, and I do think this illustrates a growing ideological intolerance. So what is intolerance? With an increase in intolerance, it's important to know the types of intolerance so that we know how to debate and challenge one another. There are 3 types of intolerance: prejudicial, intuitive, and deliberative, according to an academic article, The Psychology of Intolerance, unpacking the diverse understanding of intolerance. I only believe that 2 of them are clearly applicable to this episode. Psychologists tend to equate intolerance with being non-judgmental and open to differences, using the term to describe a tendency to be generally free of prejudice. Intolerance is then equated with prejudice or general negativity or antipathy towards a group of people that is different from oneself in various ways, often because feelings of threat. It is, for example, considered intolerant when neighbors or employees socially distance themselves from other residents or coworkers because of their race or religion. Prejudicial intolerance is linked to rigid forms of thinking. Ambiguity is a key characteristic of prejudiced personalities. Prejudiced people are narrow-minded because of their need for structure or definitiveness, whereas non-prejudiced people are characterized by mental flexibility and differentiation. In this conception, intolerance implies out-group antipathy driven by closed-mindedness, resulting in in-group superiority and out-group discrimination. Although intolerance is a negative connotation, no individual or group can be tolerant of everything. Intolerance of drinking and driving is not considered a vice but a virtue. This intolerance is less to do with the outgroup, but rather with reflective reasoning on the perceived deviance of particular practices and beliefs. For example, I'm sure you're aware of the podcaster Sam Harris's intolerance of Islam. Insofar as I can tell, his intolerance is to do with the teachings of the Quran and how it's applied. Like, to use his words, putting women in bags. Deliberative intolerance is based on a process of reflective reasoning. For example, weighing freedom of expression against the rules of a religion. These 2 types of intolerance are important to note, since the approach you would take in making your point to someone would differ depending on if you were talking to someone who is deliberately intolerant or prejudicially intolerant. Okay, so let's get into the 3 reasons why it's getting worse and not better. The first is how our media is set up. For this one, we need to start with how media companies make money. There are 4 common ways media publications are paid. The first is through display ads on their website. The second is through affiliate links. The third is through content licensing. And the fourth is through sponsorships. There are some other ways that they make money, but I would call these 4 the main methods. For this episode, we're going to focus mostly on display ads. Display ads are the ads you see on a publisher's website, within or beside the content you're reading. Publishers are paid for every click or every 1,000 impressions they serve to their readers. This is called RPM, or revenue per 1,000 impressions, and a typical RPM would range from $2 to $5. So as you can imagine, publishers need a ton of traffic to make enough money to pay the bills. Publishers will achieve this by getting you to click on their articles. The more articles you click on, the more ad impressions they're able to serve you, and the more money they make. The reason this is important is because if you're on MSNBC or Fox and all of the articles have dull headlines or dull content, you're not likely to click on it. But if they have controversial headlines that trigger you, you're more likely to click. So when you read an article where the writer has argued something egregious that makes you outraged, in many ways that's a success. There are limits, of course. MSNBC and Fox want you to come back, so they're going to toe the line between getting you to click on as many articles as possible while keeping you as a loyal reader. So to recap, media will push the boundaries of controversy because it gets all of us to click on more articles, which makes them more money. The second thing that's causing our intolerance to get worse is the way that we've fulfilled our needs. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a motivational theory in psychology, comprising of a 5-tier model of human needs, often depicted as hierarchical levels within a pyramid. From the bottom of the hierarchy upwards, the needs are psychological, which is food and clothing, safety, which is job security, love and belonging needs, which is friendship, esteem, and then self-actualization. Needs lower down on the hierarchy must be satisfied before individuals can attend to the needs higher up. This model is applied on an individual basis. So starting at the bottom, in Canada and the US, we've fulfilled our psychological needs. For the sake of argument, I believe we can say that everyone has shelter, food, sleep, and clothing. If we didn't, we wouldn't be worried about trans rights, for example, which make up a very small portion of our population. Instead, we'd be worried about what we're going to eat tomorrow. We've also satisfied our safety needs, like health, personal safety, and employment. Most of us have satisfied love and belonging through friends and family. Most of us have also fulfilled our esteem. We have respect, status, and freedom. This leaves the last tier, self-actualization, where we find purpose in life, and we start being the best we can be. One of the ways we do this is by fighting for other people's needs who don't have everything that we have. This makes sense, right? Think about it. Would you be fighting for someone else's needs if you didn't have your own needs met? Of course not. The reason this is important is because we've built countries that have fulfilled all of our needs. It's an amazing accomplishment. And now we're starting to turn to other people to ensure that they have their needs met too. Unfortunately, there are some movements that are doing damage to our society on the left and on the right. But this situation of fighting for other people's needs isn't going away. I can't remember where I heard this, but someone said, hard times make hard people and soft times make soft people. I think it's safe to say that in the West, we're not in hard times. The third thing that's contributing to our intolerance is social media and search engine personalization. We're all aware that social media puts us in a content bubble. The social media algorithms are so powerful that if you're an advertiser, the most effective way to target your audience on Facebook is to not target anyone at all. The Facebook algorithm will find your audience better than you can. As someone who's been in marketing for 15 years, I can tell you that this is the best way to run an advertisement on Facebook. It's a similar situation on search engines like Google. Users receive personalized search results based on their preferences and their search history. Let's try an experiment to prove it. If I search for puppies, and who doesn't like puppies, I'll get different search results than you. In this example, I've set my geolocation to the US, which you can also do by adding the ampersand GL equals US to your search URL. I'll add the link in the description. By clicking on the link, you and I have both set up our location in the US, but we'll still get different search results based on our individual preferences. So to bring this home, if you're someone who fights for trans rights, then you're going to be surrounded by content that supports your perspective. That results in you having a skewed perspective, and consequently, you're more likely to think that the world agrees with you. This is really important because there's something called symbolic interactionalism, where what a person believes as the truth depends on their situation and how they interact with it. A great example of this is smoking. Kids know that smoking is unhealthy, but their situation of believing that they're invincible and that smoking makes them look cool makes smoking a desirable thing. You can imagine how this works with all of the things that you interact with on a daily basis. How many of your own views are being skewed from the search engines and the social media you interact with? How much of life and adventure are we missing because social media and search engines have trapped us within our own personalization? How many times have we been upset with someone who has an opposing viewpoint simply because it was actually our own view that was skewed, not theirs? It's embarrassing to think of how many times we've likely been wrong but thought we were right, simply because our personalized content bubble was validating our own biased perspective. Think about that.